The number one question flooding my inbox this week is this. If Ripple's stablecoin is exploding, why isn't XRP exploding with it? Why are you watching RLUSD print all-time highs? Watching $200 million get minted in a single transaction on the XRP ledger, and yet your bag is still bleeding red? Let me pull back the curtain, because what I'm about to tell you is not being explained to retail investors the way it should be. While everyone was staring at the price chart, something massive just happened on the ledger. Something shifted on May 20th, and the world missed the signal. The crowd is screaming that RLUSD is killing XRP. The crowd is wrong. RLUSD isn't the assassin, it's the artillery, and the institutions firing it know exactly what target they're hitting. Make sure to like, subscribe, and drop a comment below with your opinion on XRP. And watch until the end, because the final minutes reveal why July 13th could change everything.
Welcome back. I am the Calm Analyst. Today, we decode the largest RLUSD mint in XRP ledger history and what it actually signals about the next 12 months. No hype, no Moonboy fantasy, just the math, the mechanics, and the institutional fingerprints all over this move. Let's jump in. Let's start with the hard truth. 90% of XRP holders are staring at the wrong metric. They're staring at the spot price of XRP and concluding that RLUSD must be cannibalizing it. If you're wondering why the price isn't reflecting the activity, you need to understand what a gas token actually is. Here is the mechanism nobody is explaining properly. Every transaction on the XRP ledger, every mint, every burn, every transfer of RLUSD, every tokenized asset movement requires XRP as the underlying gas token. Jack McDonald, Ripple's SVP of stablecoins, said it himself in plain English. Every time we use the stablecoin on the ledger, behind the scenes, there is utility being driven for that XRP token. Read that again. The utility is abstracted away. That's the operative phrase. Retail sees a stablecoin transfer and thinks XRP is sidelined. The reality is the inverse. Every RLUSD transaction is a tiny pump on XRP demand, executed silently, at a fraction of a penny, but multiplied across billions in monthly volume. You see, retail investors look at RLUSD as competition, but financial institutions, custodians, and treasury desks, they look at RLUSD as the Trojan horse. The stablecoin is the regulated, compliant, boring-looking wrapper that lets a JP Morgan or a Bank of New York legally route value across the XRPL without ever touching what their compliance department classifies as crypto. And every single one of those transactions still feeds the native asset underneath. This is the design. This is the architecture. RLUSD isn't replacing XRP. RLUSD feeds XRP. One is the cargo, the other is the rails, and the rails just got a $200 million shipment. Let's do the math the crowd refuses to do. RLUSD market cap as of this week, approximately $1.8 billion, up over 20% in the last 30 days. Monthly transfer volume on the XRP ledger, up over 150%. Total value moving through the ledger, including stablecoins, surpassed $1.7 billion in transfer volume, the largest spike in XRPL history. Now let's zoom in. Look at the mints, 30 million here, 85 million there, and then on May 20th, a single transaction. 200 million RLUSD minted in one move. This isn't a customer onboarding. This isn't routine treasury operations. A $200 million single mint is institutional liquidity loading. That is a market maker, a custodian or a sovereign-tier counterparty pre-positioning for activity they have already committed to. Here's the math the retail crowd ignores. RLUSD's share of stablecoin activity on the XRP ledger versus Ethereum has now closed to nearly half the pie. Every dollar of RLUSD activity on XRPL requires a fractional XRP burn for gas. Scale that across billions in monthly volume and you start to see the picture. Compare it to Ethereum. Tether on Ethereum sits at over $88 billion. Nobody asks whether USDT is replacing ETH, because everyone understands that USDT activity is what feeds ETH demand as gas. The same exact mechanism is now switching on for XRP. The only difference is timing. Ethereum has had a decade. The XRPL is at the starting line. If RLUSD captures even 5% of the global stablecoin market, currently north of $250 billion, and projected to cross $2 trillion within 5 years, according to Treasury and Standard Chartered estimates. That is $100 billion in stablecoin volume routed through the XRP ledger annually. Every basis point of that flow consumes XRP. This isn't a prediction. It's a design requirement. If you have a problem with these numbers, you don't have a problem with me. You have a problem with the architecture of the ledger itself. While retail investors are panic selling on red candles and complaining about the chart, the institutional signal has never been louder. Listen carefully to what Jack McDonald said in that Rachel Wolfson interview. He didn't say, "We're talking to a few interested parties." He said his calendar is filled with household name institutions. He said you are almost noticeable in your absence if you're a big bank or a big brokerage firm who hasn't begun their digital asset journey. That is not the language of a startup hoping for adoption. That is the language of a company turning customers away at the door. Add the context. Ripple's acquisitions of Hidden Road and Standard Custody. The launch of institutional custody infrastructure. The legal clarity from the Ripple SEC resolution. The Genius Act signed into law, providing federal stablecoin framework. The Clarity Act moving through Congress. Ripple's number 16 ranking on CNBC's 2026 Disruptor 50 list as one of the only critical blockchain infrastructure players named. Ask yourself this brutal question. Does a regulated entity mint $200 million of a stablecoin in a single transaction without absolute legal certainty and a counterparty waiting? Absolutely not. Institutions don't gamble. They position. This isn't retail FOMO. This is calculated infrastructure deployment by entities that have already cleared compliance, already signed the NDAs, and already determined that the XRP ledger is where their tokenized treasury, FX, and cross-border settlement flows are going to live. The retail crowd is staring at price. The institutions are staring at rails. The crowd wants to know when. Let me give you the catalyst map. The Clarity Act. Once it crosses the finish line, the final regulatory ambiguity that has kept the largest U.S. financial institutions on the sidelines vanishes. The wait-and-see money becomes the all-in money. Every Tier 1 bank that has been exploring the XRP ledger gets a green light from their general counsel, the Genius Act implementation. Now in force, this is what gives RLUSD its regulatory moat. Stablecoins that don't meet the standard get squeezed out. RLUSD, fully reserved, monthly attested, issued by a regulated entity, survives. The non-compliant stablecoins that currently dominate by market cap will face a reckoning, and that liquidity has to migrate somewhere. RLUSD is engineered to be the destination. Tokenization wave. BlackRock's Larry Fink has been on record stating that every asset will be tokenized. The estimated addressable market is over $4 trillion in tokenized real-world assets within the next several years. The XRP ledger was purpose-built for this. The pipes are already there. The only thing missing was a compliant on-ledger dollar. That just arrived, at scale. Continued RLUSD mints. Watch the on-chain data. Every $100 million plus mint is a tell. Track them on rwa.xyz. These are not retail movements. They are institutional pre-positioning, and they are accelerating. When these catalysts converge, and they are converging now, not in some distant future, the gap between XRP's current price and its utility-justified value collapses violently. We are moving from an era of abundance to an era of scarcity, and most XRP holders don't realize it yet. Here is what the crowd is missing. RLUSD volume on the XRP ledger doesn't just feed XRP demand. It pulls XRP into operational use. Tokens used for gas, used as bridge liquidity, used in tokenized asset settlement, are tokens that are not sitting on Coinbase or Binance available for retail to buy. Once an XRP enters an institutional multi-sig vault, once it's allocated as bridge liquidity for an enterprise corridor, once it's locked into a tokenization stack, it doesn't come back to market for a 10% profit. It's gone. Operationally absorbed. Exchange reserves of XRP are already at multi-year lows. The escrow releases each month are largely relocked, and now the institutional draw on liquid supply is just beginning. The math is brutal. Fixed supply of 100 billion, roughly 55 to 57 billion circulating. Subtract the institutional positions, the long-term cold storage, the operational liquidity getting absorbed by RLUSD-driven activity, and the actual float available for new buyers shrinks every single week. The institutions have spent years trying to shake you out so they could take your position. Every red candle, every FUD cycle, every RLUSD is killing XRP narrative. That is the smokescreen. That is the misdirection that allows them to accumulate at these levels. When the final switch flips and clarity is in the rearview mirror, the door closes. The wait-and-see retail money will become the exit liquidity for the confused, funding the entry of the informed. I know it's tough to watch the chart. I know the headlines create fear. I know that watching RLUSD print all-time highs while your XRP bag stays flat feels like a betrayal. As an analyst, I'm trained to distinguish between noise and signal, and what I'm telling you is that the signal has never been louder. The red candles are the smokescreen for accumulation. The RLUSD is killing XRP narrative is psychological warfare designed to shake weak hands. The current price is the silence of a predator waiting to strike. The boredom you feel is the calm before the systemic reset. Being early feels exactly like being wrong, right up until the moment reality catches up. And reality is catching up faster than the price is reflecting. While the masses are focused on what XRP did or didn't do this week, the smart money is reading the on-chain data, watching the mints, tracking the regulatory calendar, and quietly building positions through OTC desks that never touch a public chart. The question isn't whether XRP recovers. The question is, who will still be holding when these utility flows become the new floor? Make sure to like, subscribe, and drop a comment below with your opinion on XRP. And watch until the end, because the final minutes reveal why July 13th could change everything. Let me leave you with this. RLUSD is not the enemy. RLUSD is the proof. A $200 million single mint is not a price story. It's an infrastructure story. And infrastructure always pays the rails. Price is a distraction. Value is the reality. One is the headline. The other is the architecture. The crowd is watching the noise. You, if you've made it this far, are watching the structure. If you understood what I just laid out, drop the word rails in the comments below. I want to see who actually understands the difference between cargo and the network it rides on. If you value this kind of deep dive, subscribe and turn notifications on, because the next 90 days of on-chain data are going to be the most important signal we've had in this cycle. In a market fueled by emotion and noise, we thrive on data and composure. Haste leads to loss. Calm analysis leads to victory. Stay patient, stay rational. The math doesn't lie, and the system is almost complete. I am the calm analyst. We don't wait for the future, we position for it.